All right, good evening, everyone. Happy Sabbath. I see all faces here could respond to that. If probably we had a visitor here, I was going to be a little bit different. But happy Sabbath. We would like to welcome you to the Origins Seminar. It has been such a blessing. Let me see by the show of hands, those who have been coming here since Wednesday and Thursday. Has it been a blessing? Amen. It has been a blessing. We have been challenged, enlightened. You know, I once came across a statement that says, the Lord will never expect anyone to believe without giving them sufficient evidence upon which to base their faith. And that is just what we have been receiving for the past 2 days, evidence of creation. I once shared a story a few years back while I was still in university in my country. We lost a few friends of ours, fellow believers. They were actually studying geology. And because of what they were learning, as we have been seeing Dr. Stan Hudson sharing, they were convinced, unfortunately, out of their faith and eventually even questioned the very existence of God. And so I am very thankful to God that we have the privilege to receive very accurate, tested, and reliable biblical evidence on creation. Anybody knows what is our subject today? Dinosaurs. Let me see. Did anybody learn about dinosaurs when they were in school? I remember. We used to have to memorize all the names and the years. But I don't know if Dr. Stan Hudson is going to want us to memorize everything. Hopefully not. Okay, so welcome. So we're going to be learning about the origins of dinosaurs. Now, of course, we never want to start anything without prayer, which is why at this point I will invite our sister Antonella to come and open with a word of prayer, after which Pastor Delphine will come and introduce once again Dr. Stan Hudson.
Let's pray. Father in heaven, thank you so much for being our creator and our redeemer. Thank you so much for the privilege of having this seminar to learn about the evidence you are giving us about you being our creator. Lord, thank you, and thank you as well for all the mysteries, the things we cannot understand that remind us how big you are and how little we are. Thank you, Lord, for taking care of us, even in all the busy schedule that you may have in the universe. You take care of each one of us as your children. Thank you so much for that privilege, Lord, and help us and open our minds to learn what Dr. Hudson is going to share with us today. In Jesus' name I pray, amen.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. All right. I know I have been blessed by the series, and I had a time today, just for a few minutes, maybe about an hour, to spend some time with the Hudsons. And I tell you, we do have a wonderful couple that has graced us with their presence for this half week. And we thank God for what he has done in their life and in their ministry. You know, I'm Dr. Hudson, I know you are, quote, after this, going to go into retirement, but ministry never ends. As we talked. And so paychecks do. Oh, yeah. Paychecks do. But ministry doesn't. And so, you know, we're actually getting the cream. Because ministry gets better with experience as you submit it to the Lord. So we're getting the best version of Dr. Stan. Right? We're getting the best version of Dr. Stan. Now, as I mentioned before, Q&A is tomorrow evening at 6:30. So if you haven't written a number down, 937-613-2821. If you want to text your questions in, 937-613-2821. 921. For those who are watching online, there will be a Zoom link at the very end of the slideshow. If you're not able to be here, you could also Zoom in and ask your questions. There'll also be a live mic here if you want to do that as well. But if someone wants to send their message in and remain anonymous, that is fine as well. We use all the means available to us. And there will be a little extra tomorrow evening, a little extra. So we'll start off with a few minutes, 10, 15 minutes so of presentation, whet your appetites on what we won't get with these parts over here, right? But it's going to be a blessing. So to prepare the way, I'm going to invite someone who will be singing in a way she has never sung before. Yes? So we're praying for Tadali because baby Asante is saying, all right, I'm getting ready. So she's going to be singing with all her strength, all the air that's left inside. All right, go ahead and minister to us this evening.
This is my Father's world, and to my listening ears, all nature sings, and round me rings the music of the spheres. This is my Father's world. I rest me in the thought of rocks and trees, of skies and seas. His hand the wonders wrought. This is my Father's world. The birds their carols raise, the morning light, the lily white, declare their Maker's praise. This is my Father's world. He shines in all that's fair. In the rustling grass, I hear him pass. He speaks to me everywhere. This is my Father's world. Oh, let me ne'er forget that though the wrong seems of so strong, God is the ruler yet. This is my Father's world. Why should my heart be sad? The Lord is King. Let the heavens ring. God reigns. Let the earth be glad. God reigns, let the earth be glad.
Testing. Oh, you got two different kinds of mutes. Now, you know what? Cindy would like to know more about this. Two different switches for mutes. Okay. All right. Let me get this going here. Cindy, put this on for me, would you please? Testing? Yeah. Thank you. All right, we're all good. I just demonstrated what a dinosaur does when he gets in trouble. But anyway. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming. And we're going to talk about one of the most interesting topics, I think, in the whole. In fact, when we were doing the 6 parts and we were putting together the 6 talks, it was like a slam dunk. No, you got to do one just on dinosaurs. Okay, well, we'll do that on dinosaurs. What is the origin of the dinosaurs? Where did they come from, and why are they so significant in the whole subject of origins? So let's take a look. So we're going to talk a little bit about dragons and dinosaurs, okay? Dragons. Did you know that the Bible talks about a dragon? There is a dragon, a big reptile, right? So the great dragon was cast out, that servant of old called the devil and Satan, who deceives the whole world. He does what? Deceives the whole world in the form of a dragon. When you think of the word dragon, what is the image that pops up in your mind? Fire-breathing, pointy, right? You know, something like that maybe? Well, guess what? The original word for dragon, drakon in Greek, simply means, are you ready? Large reptile. That's all it means. And in the day that John wrote the book of Revelation, that's what it meant in his day. It did the image of something pointy like that tends to be a little bit more medieval, a little bit after the days of John writing the book of Revelation. So I want you to remember that because that's significant for the rest of the talk. Dragon means large reptile. Okay, let's keep going. So let's talk about the history, first of all, when people started to find dinosaur bones. And what did they think of them when they found them? Remember, it's a fairly recent discovery. What did they think? Now, check this guy out. This is a scientist, a chemistry professor at Oxford University. Check out his hair. Anyway, don't you want to be a scientist? In 1676, he wrote a paper about a bone that was found in England. And that bone looked very much like this bone, okay? And he thought it might have been from a Roman-era elephant in England. Not a bad guess, but as we take a look at what he wrote and how he described it and everything, look at the drawing, it was a dinosaur bone. He just didn't know about dinosaurs yet. And so as I like to tell kids when I'm talking about this illustration, I say, sometimes scientists are wrong. Now, this next illustration is of a pastor. This pastor was pastoring a church in a little town in Connecticut, and he noticed that by the side of the road, there were a lot of footprints in the rock, in the solid rock. And those footprints sure looked like big bird footprints. So he thought, you know, a long time ago, there must have been a bunch of ostriches running around in Connecticut. And he thinks they're from giant birds. In fact, however, and let me show you, I've got actually a footprint from the same rock strata cut out of the ground. These are the things that he saw. I don't know if you can see that very well, but you see the big 3 toes. It kind of looked like a bird's footprint. And so he said they were from giant birds. Well, and kids like this part, sometimes pastors are wrong. Okay? So Sometimes even pastors are wrong. I remember it was about 5-10 years ago I was wrong that year. But anyway, okay, so let's keep going. Giant birds. Well, they found more bones, and the more bones they found, the more they came to some different conclusions. In the early 1800s, they found a tooth in England. It was a doctor, a physician that found it. His name was Mantell. And he showed the tooth to some of his science nerd buddies and said, "Tell me what you think this tooth was from." And finally, one of them said to him, "Well, I'll tell you what it looks like, but it can't be that." Well, what does it look like? It looks like it's a little tiny iguanodon's tooth. Iguana's tooth, a little lizard tooth. Except, problem is, 20 times too big. And so they found more bones in England. They put them all together, and they came up with what they call an iguanodon. Iguana tooth. Now, that's the first artist's rendering of basically what turned out to be a dinosaur. Isn't that cool and archaic looking? I think it's so cool looking. But that's what they thought maybe they looked like. They found more bones, and eventually they believe it looked a little bit more like that. They found also a jawbone with a serious tooth in it, and somehow or other they came up with the idea it was from what they would call a megalosaurus, which means giant or big lizard. And so that's the drawing for that. Pretty interesting. But probably one of the significant developments in the middle 1800s in England was from Sir Richard Owen. Now, he was a Christian, I like to point that out, but he was a British anatomist. If you'd never heard of Charles Darwin, this would have been the most famous scientist of the 19th century in England. He established the British Museum, for one thing. Anyway, he was an anatomist, so he knew about bones, and he came up with an interesting word. He put the word dinos from Greek and sauros, which means lizard, and came up with the word dinosauria or dinosaur, as we know today. So he created the term. I like to point that out to mixed groups that it was a Christian that came up with the term. Anyway, so awesome lizard. Not bad, not bad. Incidentally, whenever you see saurus at the end of any word, that's lizard. So something lizard, Tyrannosaurus, lizard. So you get that? Okay. All right, so for years, well, this was probably the first public depiction of dinosaurs, and this was at sort of like a World's Fair in England. And they actually had stone statues of those earlier drawings you saw of those first dinosaurs they started to identify in England. So those, incidentally, those statues exist today in some of the parks in London. Anyway, but let's go to an American to put dinosaurs on the map, okay? Dr. Joseph Leidy had a museum in Philadelphia, and he had heard about a yard over in New Jersey, a backyard that actually was producing giant bones. So he asked the owner, "Can I put those bones in my museum?" He got permission, and then he established these two, or put together this skeleton. And now he did not have a skull, so he made one out of paper mache and put it on top. Just imagine what it might have looked like. And there it is. And he called the whole thing a hadrosaur, or duckbill dinosaur. Hadrosaur, 1868. Notice that date. That is the first time a skeleton of a dinosaur was on display anywhere in the world. And this was astounding. This amazed the whole planet. They've never heard or seen anything like this. And I'll have to tell you this, Philadelphia is in the United States. They found out they could sell tickets. And so they sold tickets. And the line went down the street and around the corner. And you know what? Other museums noticed that and said, well, we got to get these dinosaur bones in our museum so we can sell tickets too. So it really started a big craze. Incidentally, that first dinosaur was found basically in the New Jersey side from Philadelphia. These are the bones that they found. Okay, that's all they found. Just a tiny piece of the skull, but a little bit of an arm, a little bit, one leg, A few backbones, that's it. And so the rest they imagined from those few bones, which is not unusual when you do dinosaur skeleton models. So anyway, kind of interesting. That's from a modern picture in Philadelphia at the museum there. Okay, so this is what the first dinosaur they think kind of looked like. Impressive. We don't have animals like this anymore, right? So, like I said, the museums were hiring dinosaur bone hunters to go out into Colorado, into Utah, into South Dakota, into Montana and Wyoming and northern Arizona, and they were going looking for and breaking just about every modern day law about digging things up on properties. And anyway, brought those big bones back to the museums and started to assemble them there. Now, they started to find more dinosaur bones in England and in Belgium. This is an iguanodon they found in Belgium, put it on display in their museum there. American dinosaurs were starting to tour the planet, Europe especially. This one on the right is actually a Brachiosaurus that was sent to the Louvre in Paris to put on display. And this was starting to really catch on. Now, one of the things I want you to understand from this, and let me do this one other of the Brontosaurus. In 1905, the big museum in New York, the American Museum of Natural History, said, we got to have something that's worthy of our museum. And so they got this huge and beautifully done, what we would call a sauropod, or a four-legged dinosaur. Now, this thing was just sensational. 1905, it was huge. And people came from all around the world, and they took a look at this thing, including dinosaur people that actually knew a little bit about the subject, and took a look at it, and they said, my goodness, this is a wonderful, are you sure about the head? It turns out they had the wrong head on that dinosaur. And so they actually put two dinosaurs together to make this skeleton. And because of that, and they named it Brontosaurus, the Brontosaurus, if you ever want to get into a real lively discussion with a dinosaur nerd, and they are out there, love dinosaur fans. If you want to get into a discussion with them, ask them the following question. So do you think there is such a thing as a Brontosaurus? They will have an opinion about it. But anyway, so this is a Camarasaurus head on an Apatosaurus body, a similar dinosaur to this other. So the head kind of looks like it fits. But anyway, two different dinosaurs. So it's a little bit embarrassing to the museum, of course. Now, behind that display was this painting on the wall. And people looked at this thing and this painting and they said, yeah, what kind of world are we looking at? What kind of place did these dinosaurs live? And it just was difficult to imagine the scenery. It was sensational. And yeah, to this day, you kind of wonder, right? Well, when they were finding these giant dinosaurs, the thing that seemed most impressive about them was, of course, their size. Because, let me show you here. I've got a few real dinosaur teeth down here. Now, this tooth is from a Camarasaurus, like that head on that Brontosaurus was from a Camarasaurus. Anyway, if you take a look at this, and it's black because it turned black in the soil that it was buried in, but this round shape, this tooth was actually in the shape of a spoon, kind of, and actually it shows that it ate plants. It ate plants, bushes, trees, and so on. So all of the dinosaurs that they found between the early 1800s and all the way up to 1900 were clearly vegetarian in their diet based on their teeth. And so the only thing that was really scary about them was their size. Like, don't get stepped on kind of worries. That was it. But then everything changed when they found something that had teeth. In 1905, Harry Osborn found in Wyoming, just in the very northeastern corner of Wyoming, he found something that was different with the teeth. And of course, he named it a Tyrannosaurus rex. And if you know what the words there mean, it basically means king tyrant lizard or mean king lizard. And of course, they put this skeleton up for people to look at, and boy, overnight, this changed the image of dinosaurs. From not just don't get stepped on to don't see them in a dark alley anywhere, right? So you don't want to see them. And look at that. You can see that that was sensational. Let me show you a tooth of a T-Rex. Well, this is a copy because a real one would cost $25,000. So we'll just go with a copy for right now. And this much showed. The rest of this is a root, but this much showed on a T-Rex, an adult. Incidentally, this comes from a T-Rex that was nicknamed Stan. No kidding. Anyway, we'll talk about Stan in a minute. So take a look at that. Now, there's $25,000 for this, so only part of a T-Rex tooth I could afford is I did once buy a tip. So that's how much T-Rex. Although I'll have to tell you, and you look at this stuff, you wonder, how could Pastor Stan afford this? And as Pastor Gordon could tell you, they pay us so much money in our salaries. I mean, at the end of each month, we just sit around wondering, how are we going to spend all this extra money? So, anyway, so do you believe that? Oh, let me show you one other thing about a T-Rex. This is a T-Rex tooth's cousin. It comes from Africa, and Carcharodontosaurus. And that is, you can tell it's a raptor tooth because all raptor teeth are shaped like that. That's a raptor tooth. Raptor tooth, and these teeth are clearly ate animals, ate flesh. So, but only a T-Rex is fat. So if you're ever in the market for a T-Rex tooth, and who wouldn't be, you can see that this is clearly not a T-Rex tooth because it's skinny. But anyway, this I know. Now that's free to help you with your marketing skills. Okay, so here we go. So T-Rexes. Boy, did T-Rexes change our image of dinosaurs. I'm going to talk just a bit about T-Rex because, frankly, Jonathan wants me to. So anyway, no, Jonathan is a big fan of T-Rexes. One thing that we know about T-Rexes is we know what they ate. And they ate, what's that? Meat, yeah. What's it called? Triceratops, right. Three-horn head. That's what that means. Okay, so Triceratops. Now, you know what that does not answer? A lingering question that we've had for years about these guys. Was T-Rex a predator or a scavenger? And remember, they could have eaten a Triceratops either way. Could have been a dead Triceratops or a live one. Incidentally, why does that look like that's not a very good predator? A little bitty front arms, right? How can he grab something? And then the other thing is, it's got such a heavy, large body. It doesn't look like it'd be very fast running. I do tell people, though, that we do know that these Edmontosauruses, these were duck-billed dinosaurs, they lived in the same area as these guys. The bones are found together. So we know that these ran 25 miles an hour. Oh, how do we know that? Because T-Rex could run 24 miles an hour. I appreciate that. Thank you, sir. Thank you. You got it. Okay, anyway, how would we know that a T-Rex ate a Triceratops in the first place? How would we know that? Take a guess. Stomach contents of a T-Rex skeleton, the lunch was still in the stomach, so the little bit of bones that they found in there were Triceratops bones. But again, did it eat from a dead one or a live one? That's still, but right now, I think that the general leaning is toward it ate both. It ate both, live and dead. So anyway, but here's an interesting fossil. And this relates a little bit to what we talked about last night, the flood. There is a T-Rex body in here along with a Triceratops body, a skeleton. And they noticed that on the Triceratops, there are teeth marks on the bones. When they looked at the T-Rex's bones, they found broken rib bones. And so what is this this double two skeletons buried in mudstone and together. What could possibly have done that? And there is only one scenario that makes sense, and that is as the water was coming up, these two animals were looking for high ground. And when they found high ground, they got a little close. And as they were on that high ground, they were fighting and kept fighting probably until the water caught up with them and buried them on the spot. And that's pretty much the only scenario you can come up with to explain that, I think. Anyway, so was it a predator or a scavenger? Probably both, probably both. We do have a couple of verified footprints for a T-Rex, but there are not too many of them for sure. But here's one found in New Mexico, 33 inches long, okay, 28 inches wide, 9 inches deep. So that's a heavy animal, right? This T-Rex was the best one they ever found. And you know how much of it existed, or the skeleton, how much of the skeleton was still around? 40%. That's all, 40%. Incidentally, how much of a dinosaur, of any skeleton do you have to have for it goes beyond just a few remains or bits and pieces to an actual skeleton? What is the percentage of bones you have to qualify as a skeleton? 10% is correct. Was that an educated guess? Okay, 10% is correct. And so 10%, if you think about it, why is that important? Because you can watch the internet and often there will be some new discovery, some new animal fossil thing found and it's a skeleton. And then it says something like, boy, does this ever fill in all the gaps and all the questions we've ever had about anything involving evolution. This is a slam dunk for Darwin. It takes care of all our problems. You know what I mean? High praise for some discovery. And then you find out that it was like 10% or 20% or something, and a whole lot of guessing went on to the body structure. And then you look at it a few months later where other scientists were able to look at the same remains that didn't have an axe to grind or promote the thing to make themselves known, then they will say, it's probably not quite what they're making it out to be. And you never hear about that. That never is a follow-up. Anyway, so only 10% is a skeleton. So this T-Rex, I told you about Stan, that's Stan. So Stan, 40%, and for years was on display in South Dakota in Hill City. And then they found a dinosaur named Sue. Sue was discovered in 1990 in South Dakota. And Sue was 90% complete. Jumping from 40 to 90. Can you imagine? So Sue was sold to the Field Museum in Chicago for $8 million, which is, today it would have, at a zero. But anyway, a steal in 1990, I think, and put on display in the Field Museum. There she is on display. And the Field Museum is in America. They sell tickets. And Cindy and I have had a chance to visit them. We had to get the wallet out to see Sue, but we saw Sue. Incidentally, real quick question. Two of them, actually. Here's the first one. Is that Sue actually? Is that really her bones? In almost every case, significant skeletons actually have copies made of their bones, and the copies are on display. People don't know that very much, and sometimes museums are realizing people are figuring this out, and so they will sometimes say, these are not original bones, or these are original bones. Hey, see, we do have some original bones. But anyway, they don't have the real one out on display usually for a couple of reasons. Number one, those are extremely valuable skeleton bones, and if they were to fall and break, that's a bad thing. Or they can fall and break on somebody that's visiting. So anyway, a lot of reasons to not have it. Incidentally, in this particular picture, right up at the top, can't quite see it, but the second floor there, they actually have Sue's skull on display, the real skull on display there. And incidentally, skulls are where the money is. Skulls do not exist very much in fossil being petrified. If you ever dig up a skeleton and you got the skull, man, you just paid for somebody's college education, because that's the money, that's the rarity. But Sue had a beautiful, beautiful skull. Incidentally, why is Sue named Sue? And why was Stan called Stan? Because we don't know the gender of dinosaurs. Then how did they get those names? And silence. The people who found them is exactly right. Who said that? Who said that? Very good there, very good. It's a person that found them that actually, Sue was found by a woman scientist named Sue. Stan was found by a Stan. And so that's it. But we don't know the genders. We know they laid eggs. They look at the pelvic structure. They're not sure. So anyway, just kind of interesting. So Sue, if you get a chance to get to Chicago, check out Sue, but get your wallet out. Now, T-Rexes have actually helped creationists with what I consider to be the most difficult question we have to face, and that is, how old is everything? Okay? Because in 2005, a science group from, and I forget if it's North Carolina, South Carolina, one of the Carolinas, actually were studying the bones of a T-Rex, put some of them into a solution that would basically dissolve the outer part. They wanted to study the inner part. They accidentally left it in too long, I think, and they got into the center, which they didn't particularly want to do. But when they got to the center and looked at the inside, you could almost hear somebody shouting across the country audibly, "We have got soft tissue here." Huh? We have got soft tissue. Soft tissue, including soft tissue that was flexible. There was a vessel inside that actually could be bent. They had red blood cell stains on the interior. Both of those are organic items, organic materials. Organic materials are not supposed to exist in millions and millions of years old. Anything. In fact, many science studies have been done by evolutionists that were curious to know how long does it take for organic materials like proteins to disappear from a fossil. And they've done studies and they've come up with answers. It takes thousands of years. They can last that long, thousands of years. But these are supposedly 65 million years old. And so it's a very difficult thing. The woman that was the head of this science group published this matter. We have flexible, we have soft tissue inside a T-Rex bone. She got hammered. She got hammered by science groups all over the world. In fact, there was no women advocates standing up at the time. You'd like to have seen it. But anyway, men would tell her stuff like this: "You call yourself a scientist? How dare you publish something so silly as this? The university that has you on their staff should fire you. You have no rights to. What a terrible scientist you are, but you're the laughingstock of the science world." You know, I mean, really tough stuff. In a couple of cases, however, they mentioned some specifics that she could have done better, and she looked at that and she said, "You know what, I could have done a couple things better." She redid her study, her research, and came up with the same conclusion. And now they reluctantly accept that as possible. And what that has actually done is opened up a whole door in the study of fossils, because now people never even dreamt of looking for organic material on fossils because they were too old. We knew this, this is 200 million years old. We know there's not going to be anything in it still, so why would we even try to look? But now they're doing it. They're looking, and there's been dozens of discoveries of organic material. So, how about that? This woman scientist made a very good science statement at the end of all this. She said this: either there are ways of preserving organic material inside bones that we have no concept of, not even close, no concept of, or these bones are not as old as we thought. That's a good statement. That's a good statement. So, anyway. All right, a little bit more on dinosaurs and footprints or fossil evidence. And let's talk about something I think is kind of cool. In fact, I've got it down here. How'd you like to see what skin looked like on a dinosaur? Well, here I go. I'll hold it out real close for you so you can see. Well, anyway, take a look at this picture up here. It is that same piece. This is a skin impression. Now, how do you get a skin impression of a dinosaur? Well, let's assume for a minute what we think to be true, and that is that the vast majority died in a flood. And that is their bodies got covered up with mud as they were being, over time, buried and preserved and petrified. And years later, you've got people coming along and saying, let's get those dinosaur bones out of the ground. And so they dig them up. And what they have found out was when that mud came onto that dinosaur limb, let's say a leg or an arm or something, when they pop it open to get at the bone, they said, oh, they could still see the shape of the dinosaur skin. And when they did that, they found out that they had, just like any lizard, had scales. And so sometimes you hear people saying, I don't think a dinosaur was a reptile at all. Well, okay, but it had scales, like any other reptile. That's kind of interesting. So, what about eggs? Now, when I was a little kid and I heard about dinosaurs and I knew how big the skeletons were, I said, well, man, the size of if they laid eggs like regular lizards, imagine, they must have been they had to be that big, right? Had to be the size of a small car or something. Well, guess what? They are more like this. This is a dinosaur egg from China, and this is about as big as they get. They don't get maybe 10% bigger, but that's about it. Raptor eggs are a little longer and narrower, but they're not the volume similar. So is there a dinosaur? I know. What's the next question? Is there dinosaur bones inside here? Is there an embryo inside this? And unfortunately, no. Because it would be very valuable. But anyway, you can see that the bottom of this is broken off, and so it's filled in. However, the shape has been preserved wonderfully. And so dinosaurs all started small, including the big guys. All started small. So that's kind of an interesting image that I have. It has ramifications for things like the ark and so on. But anyway, okay. Dinosaur eggs, the size. Oh, and here's a picture of one that actually had embryo in it, but I'd say 1 in 10,000 maybe has them. They are extremely rare. So, how would y'all like to be diggers up of dinosaur bones yourselves? How'd you like to be part of a dinosaur dig? Well, you can be. We're going to show a video in just a minute here, but take a look at this picture. This is out in northeast Wyoming. And this is on a ranch owned by a Christian family, not Adventist, a Christian family that has had it for about 100 years, and it has on their property a world-class dinosaur bed. It is just full of dinosaur bones, and they wanted providentially to not have those bones studied by evolutionists. They wanted it to be studied by Christian creationists. So anyway, providentially, God has connected Southwestern Adventist University with these people, the Hansons, and there's been a dig there every June, for anywhere from June 1st to June 30. Anybody who wants to be part of that, they're looking for volunteers. You can go out there, take your tent, take your RV, something like that, and go out and you will dig and find things. I'm going to show a little video here in just a second of some of this. But anyway, take a look at that, and you will find things. There's my assistant's teenage daughter showing something that she found. There's a picture of me holding a little Edmontosaurus rib, probably a young Edmontosaurus. Here I am digging up a full-grown Edmontosaurus rib. The rib was like this. You can see I had more hair, darker. Anyway, take a look right there at that little bottle. See that right there? That little bottle has got something very similar to super glue in it. And you would pour that onto the bone that's being cleaned out and brought out. And it would just go in just right into the bone and make it very, very hard and easy to transport. But before, we would actually wrap them in aluminum and remove them before they're actually taken out of the ground. Somebody like Dr. Art Chadwick there or one of his assistants would come over with a GPS ground locating probe and put it right on the corners of that bone before it's taken out and record its position to a fraction of an inch. Then a picture would be taken of that bone, and to scale, it would be dropped into a program like that. And so what you're looking at is the bone bed as though the dirt was removed, and you're seeing all the bones to scale in place. This is high-tech advanced stuff, cutting-edge stuff. And this is the work that they're doing out there. Take a look at that picture for a minute, and let's see if you can do some suggestions about what we're looking at. Take a look at this bone bed. Incidentally, this program is three-dimensional. You can turn it and look at the strata the way it is like this. And you can see that the larger, heavier bones are at the bottom and the lighter ones at the top. But take a look at bones. Tell me what you see or what you don't see in the picture. You don't see a skull. Remember what I said before about skulls. They're the first things to break. So skulls are very fragile. The bone, the facial bones and everything are very thin. If you find anything, it's usually a little bit of the jaw because the jaw is a little heavier. What else do you not see? Okay. Do you see any connecting of bones? Anything on the way to a skeleton? No, these are disarticulated bones. They are loose and separate from each other. In fact, if you were to look at them carefully, you would notice that each one of them has a little bit of rounding on the corners. In other words, these were rolled a little bit, and probably in water, because this is a mudstone. This is about a 2.5 foot thick bone bed here. Nothing above, nothing below, mudstone, very soft. So, okay, I asked Dr. Chadwick, right here, I asked him, have you done surveys of these other areas around here? Because I can see that same thing across this. Kind of like they're like the Badlands of South Dakota, kind of over into Wyoming. And so you see some of that same layer. Have you done a survey over there? Over there? Yes, we have. What have you find? Same concentration of bones. Okay. Have you thought about what we're looking at in terms of numbers of dinosaurs? And these are almost all from this guy. This is a Hadrosaurus. It's an Edmontosaurus, Hadrosaurus family. And it's about the size of a giraffe. And pretty good size. Some of them got pretty big. Anyway, so Dr. Chadwick, what do you think we're looking at here? And he says, I think we're looking at the remains of between 10 and 20,000 hadrosaurs. 10 and 20,000. And these are all water deposited in a mudstone, but look, they're disarticulated. So what happened here? Wherever they were killed, and Dr. Chadwick will be on this video explaining how he thought they died in a flood, or in water, and the water rolled their bodies so far, and there was rotting going on and everything. And eventually these pieces ended up in a little bit of a depression, got filled up with mud, and preserved. What do you think that sounds like to you? Sounds like the flood, one of the aspects of the flood. Anyway, so what they're doing there is very supportive of the biblical narration about a flood. Okay, so let me just go a little bit quicker here. Dinosaur to bird evolution, there are two theories. You realize that when you go to Kentucky Fried Chicken, not all of you would, but some of you might. You're asking for a bucket of T-Rexes because that's what they're thinking they've got there, or at least science would like you to believe in dinosaur to bird evolution. And there are two theories about this. First one is the large ground bipeds. Okay, I'm going to refer to my T-Rex buddy here again. I like this one because he's smiling. Smiling. Anyway, how can you imagine this becoming a bird? What are the problems in this becoming a bird? Well, feathers, sure. Too heavy. How, how about these little arms becoming the largest limbs and these becoming the smallest limbs? How about losing this heavy tail? How about losing a whole lot of weight? Actually, if somebody come up with what's right about this becoming a bird, it would be the most accurate of things. And there's a lot of problems with dinosaur to bird evolution. Here's a couple. First of all, you're going from cold-blooded to warm-blooded. That's one. You're also going from lungs that are totally different. And lizard lungs are very slow, very slow pace. However, birds, when they're flying, whenever they're flapping their wings, they're doing that with their lungs. And that is just so, it's a challenge. So one of the things they admit is a problem with the large ground bipeds, 2 legs. So they say there's another theory, and that's small crocodiles from the trees. That's their words, not mine. Small crocodiles. So small crocodiles climb up these trees. They see a food source. They jump out and get the food source, eat it, make babies. Okay, that's it. All right, and the next thing is somehow one of the babies of the crocodile somehow had wing flaps, sort of like a flying squirrel thing. In other words, from here to here. And so they could sail out a little further, increase their range of getting food, be successful, and make babies. Incidentally, it's all about making babies. That's another subject. Okay, so the ones that are successful make babies. So over time, those wing flaps become wings, they grow feathers, and they become birds. Any questions? Okay. So for instance, let's talk about feathers. How do you grow feathers? What does a feather start as in evolution? A feather starts as a bump on a scaly skin. So those bumps are all going to become, they are the forerunners of feather, which is a follicle that grows out from underneath the skin and opens up. And so there's some bumps and there's a feather. I'm going to show you very slowly so you can see the subtle change. Did you see that? Okay, let me do it again. So you see it? Do you see it? Okay, anyway. So, so that's the idea. And they really feel this is an absolute for sure thing. One time I was reading in National Geographic. National Geographic, as I mentioned before, is the signs of the times of evolution. They had a story on T-Rexes. And to show you how much they promote T-Rexes as being the forerunners of birds, they were describing a scene with a mother T-Rex, and as the writer called it, with her chicks. Did you catch that subtle inference? She didn't have baby reptiles, she had chicks. And so anyway, okay, so let's keep going. I'm going to skip this, I think. I don't really have a lot of time for this. That's a long description. Okay, and this one too. All right, dinosaur evolution by types. When you think of evolution, you think about dinosaurs, you think dinosaurs evolved, surely. I mean, and there must be evidence of dinosaur evolution. We certainly know what levels. I told you dinosaurs are in the Cretaceous level, the Jurassic level, and the top half of the Triassic level. And if you go back to Triassic level, there supposedly must have existed a grandpa of all dinosaurs, and eventually they must have come out into branches and become the basic types that we see. So let's put this on its side if you want to do that. These are the 10 basic groups of dinosaurs. I even put birds on there as a type. So those are the numbers, minimal numbers of skeletal remains we found of these basic types of dinosaurs. Now, I want you to think of that as the top of the ground, and this is down below, okay? So this whole chart should be turned like this in terms of time. So that's going from left to right, older to more recent. So if we dig underneath these skeletons and these types, and see they're connected this way, we think that when these two connected and so on. We think originally that must have been the way they happened. So let's go digging for these fossil remains of ancestors of dinosaurs. And we do have fossils in those layers. Let's see what we can find. Okay, all right, I guess you're kind of getting the idea. We're not finding any ancestors of dinosaurs at all. Nothing on the way to becoming anything like a dinosaur. You think I'm kidding about this, and this is a dinosaur expert and evolutionist. And he was asked the question, what about the ancestors of dinosaurs? From my reading of the fossil record of dinosaurs, no direct ancestors have been discovered for any dinosaur species. Alas, my list of dinosaurian ancestors is an empty one. So, remember I told you about how that persistent problem in paleontology is the lack of transitional forms in the fossil. We don't see anything on the way to becoming something else. And so there are gaps in the fossil record. That includes dinosaurs and their potential ancestors. So, you know, in science, let me just say something basic about science. In science, almost any area in science, were you to show them the mathematical challenges they have of what they are proposing, how the chances actually could happen, yes or no, and when they are significantly like they really can't happen, in every other field of science, not origins, but in every other field, the tendency is, okay, well then let's go back to the drawing board. Let's find a better theory. But they just hold on to this with both hands. It's just really interesting. Even when you say, but look, we don't have any answers. We don't have the fossil record that proves this. Okay, take a look at this. Let's talk about dinosaurs and their size and their weight and everything. Take a look at this. We all know dinosaurs are big, right? Well, actually, they were kind of small, too. And if you've ever seen any of those Jurassic Park movies, which feature some of the worst science you will ever see, but really interesting, great storylines, just bad science. One of the things they get right is they do depict, especially the later movies, small dinosaurs the size of birds. In fact, we have skeletons of dinosaurs as small as chickens. And so my next question is really a trivia question, where you can wow people if you know the answer. What's the difference between a dinosaur and a regular lizard? Because I just showed you it's not size. The average size of a dinosaur was the size of a large dog, meaning half of them were smaller and half were larger, okay? Interesting. So what was the difference? What's the difference between a dinosaur and a regular reptile? And like I said, it's not the size.
The regular reptile's still here.
That's a major difference, isn't it? Okay, but what is there that will tell you the difference between the two? Hint, it's in the structure of the body, if that helps. Struct. Oh, you're in the right neighborhood. Okay, very good. That's it. Exactly right. So a regular reptile, like let's say a Komodo dragon or an alligator or something like that, actually has legs going straight out, and then at the knee comes down. And so they kind of hang around the floor, the ground, right? You know, they do that. Whereas dinosaurs have hips that put the legs straight down and get the body well off of the ground. Whether it's 2 legs or 4 legs, That's the structure of the hips. Incidentally, you know when I was talking about bird evolution, incidentally, I totally get why there are some dinosaurs potentially that have feathers. I totally get why they think there's similar structure in the bodies. There's no question that the anatomy of some birds and some lizards are fairly similar. But they're still different enough. But anyway, there's some similarities there. I get that. So, yes. Okay, so that's the difference, and now you know the trivia answer to that. Okay, now I'm going to show you a video right now, and it's going to be showing dinosaur experts talking on this subject, except for me. I'm not a dinosaur expert, but here we go. Let's take a look.
In the mid-1800s, when dinosaur bones were being found all around the world, they did much to strengthen Charles Darwin's questioning of the biblical account of creation. There's no question that these bones reveal an ancient world much different than the world in which we're living now. Let's go and take a look at where those dinosaur bones are being found. Let's go to a dig site in the state of Wyoming.
I got a call from a friend of mine, and he told me about this place in Wyoming where there were a lot of dinosaur bones and that they wanted a creationist to work on it. So I wasn't really initially interested, so I called a colleague of mine who's a vertebrate paleontologist, and he came out and looked at it. Subsequently, he brought me out here, and we looked at it together, and the owner of the ranch, who's a very wonderful person, brought me up onto one of these ridges. It's actually very near to here. And he opened up the door of his truck and got out, and he said, okay, hop out. And I looked down at the ground. It was covered with dinosaur bones. I couldn't walk on the ground. I had to step nimbly to keep from stepping on them. But that convinced me that I needed to spend time on this because these bones are being washed away and they're lost to science.
So somewhere, sometime, dinosaurs were here. And what we see behind us, this whole area, these are the main quarries here. There's some outlying quarries. But the main quarries are approximately 1 meter thick and cover quite an area. So the little bits you see here that's already been taken out, a couple other quarries are about 1.5% of what we think the whole bone bed is. We have quite a range of dinosaurs the main ones are hadrosaurs. They are the duck-billed dinosaurs, 35 feet long, 6 tons, 5 to 6 tons, big ones.
These dinosaurs show a lot of decay took place before they were buried, ultimately buried. They may have been buried and then re-emerged. But the most sensible scenario I can think of is that these dinosaurs were killed probably by drowning or some other cataclysm. And they floated and bloated so that the carcasses were floating on water. They were probably driven onto a shoreline by wind where they rotted for a period of time. And during this time they were rotting, the carnivorous dinosaurs were still around, and they came over and began to eat on these carcasses because we find the shed teeth of carnivorous dinosaurs, of the theropods. We find those in amongst the bones. Ultimately, the bones were remobilized and transported out into deeper water, and we know that because they occur in a graded bed. So the big bones are at the bottom and the little bones are at the top.
Our project has advanced our view on origins because of the techniques we use. The high-precision GPS data allows us to map our bone beds. And by doing so, we've been able to figure out what event led to all these dinosaurs being deposited at this site. Our system is so advanced that the greater scientific community has noticed what we're doing, and we've been able to publish our data. I think this is amazing because not only are we seeing that our deposit was put there by a flood-like event, now that other scientists are examining their bone beds and looking for alternative scenarios, they're also seeing evidence of catastrophic flood events. And even though we can't say this is a global type flood event just yet, we do see more and more evidence for catastrophic flood events resulting in large bone beds.
One of the questions a lot of young people have is where did the dinosaurs come from? Did God make them, or are they some anomaly of nature that is freaky and difficult to explain? I think most kids love dinosaurs, and I think it's very clear God made dinosaurs. They were alive, they were amazing creatures, and there are whole ecosystems that comprised of dinosaurs.
Will there be dinosaurs in heaven? I sure hope so. I love to be a good Christian, to try my best, but I get a little extra motivation from thinking that I get to play with a T-Rex or play fetch with some raptors in heaven. I personally think they're remarkable animals, and I can't wait to see them in person. At least I hope. I can't prove it, but I really do hope we get to see them again.
I would love to see some, like feathered dinosaurs like the, Deinonychus and the raptors and things like that, and see really how bird-like were they. I think that some of those dinosaurs probably were part of God's creation. And so I hope. I don't know, but I hope.
I'm a biologist. I want to study these things. And I will tell you that when I look at dinosaurs, they're not the dreadful things that are frequently depicted in the movies. Yes, there are obviously some that were predators of various kinds, some of them terrifyingly big like T-Rex, or just terrifyingly big like the titanosaurs and things. But most dinosaurs were normal-sized creatures. Many of them were obviously herbivores, so they ate plants. I'd like to see one of those in action. They look like they were amazingly designed creatures, and I have lots of questions about them. I want to know how those absolutely huge dinosaurs, how they got blood up to their brains. We talk about how small their brains were, and I have lots of questions about that. But how did they pump all that blood way up there? These things are more than twice as tall, or at least twice as tall, as giraffes are today. We know that giraffes have very specialized systems to allow them to be that tall. I want to know what was going on with those dinosaurs that allowed them to be massive in the way that a few of them were.
I think heaven's going to be a lot different from what we expect and what we have on this world. I don't know if there's any reason to have dinosaurs in heaven. I don't even know if we'll have horses in heaven. I mean, I don't know what's going to be there. But I'll leave that with the Lord. He can decide that, and I'll be happy with his answer.
I feel very strongly that dinosaurs will be in heaven. I think they're amazing creatures. And if it is a dinosaur Job is talking about in Job 40 as behemoth, then he says it's the first of the creation of God. So it's something really special to him.
I don't want to see a dinosaur when I first get to heaven because I'm still only 5'8". But we have the impression that we will grow up and just to see these enormous organisms, I would feel like an ant, and maybe be squished. But certainly that possibility exists.
You know what I think? I think when we get to heaven, or perhaps more appropriately the new earth, we'll get a number of surprises. We'll be surprised by some of the people who are there. We might be surprised by some of the people who are not there. We might even be surprised by some of the animals that we see, maybe animals that we've never seen before. Now, if God created dinosaurs to begin with, then they were wiped out by some means or another. No doubt they'll be there. But I'm willing to leave this one to God. If they're there, I'll be thrilled. That'll add some interest. If they're not, probably won't miss them too much.
This is a replica skull of an Edmontosaurus, the kind of dinosaur that they are finding the remains of thousands of there in the Wyoming dig site we just saw. Dinosaurs are a very popular subject today in the world, especially among kids. For many, they prove the idea that the world is millions of years old. But let's start thinking of them in a different way. Let's start thinking of them as a class of animals that God created that he might be actually rather proud of. Let's take a look at that now.
As you can imagine, it was fun to ask those guys, do you think there'll be dinosaurs in heaven? And just to see them be surprised by the question and wrestle with it was kind of fun. All right, so does the Bible tell us anything about dinosaurs? Now remember, it's a fairly new term, so let's see. Well, there's a couple of things that are very intriguing. So God created great sea creatures, and in Genesis 1, and the word creatures is tenem. Tenem usually, for the rest of the Old Testament, means reptiles of some kind. So did God create great sea reptiles? We'll leave that to you to decide, a little hazy. But probably one of the best candidates is something that Dr. Chadwick there mentions, a reference to, and that's in Job 40. When God is speaking, incidentally, it's one of the best parts of the Bible because it has the longest time in which God is speaking uninterrupted. And that is God talking about what? Nature, about the things he's created. And it's just fascinating to me. If I could even put it in modern human terms, he almost sounds like he's bragging. Have you seen this, Job? Have you seen this that I have made? And now he's talking about a behemoth. And the word behemoth in Hebrew means beast. So no great help there as to what the animal is. Let's take a look at the descriptions, which I made along with you. Sixth day of creation, human. He eats grass like an ox. He's vegan, yay. See now, his strength is in his hips. His power is in his stomach muscles. He moves his tail like a cedar. His bones are like beams of bronze. His ribs like bars of iron. Are you getting the imagery there of a powerful animal? He is the first of the ways of God. Now, I was really curious about that phrase, he is the first of the ways of God, and I really did a study on that, and there is a consistent agreement among scholars that this is not talking chronologically, as in the first one made and then other things were made afterwards. This is talking about an animal that stands first place among all the animals. Top of the pyramid, the alpha of alphas, the most amazing winner of an animal contest, right? This is an amazing thing. And so I look at the bottom of my Bible page and where it has little helps, and it says at the bottom of that page on Job 40, scholars think the behemoth was a hippopotamus. Hippopotamus. Okay. Have you seen this little reference? Incidentally, do you think of a hippopotamus as the most wonderful, powerful in the middle? Yes, but the most incredible animal ever? Take a look at this. He moves, or literally in the Hebrew, he sways his tail like a cedar tree. Now, the cedar trees are the largest tree in the Middle East. Have you seen the tail of a hippopotamus? All right. And second choice is elephant. Same issue. So when you see either of their tails, does it evoke in your mind a picture of a mighty cedar tree? Doesn't really. And so here's a possibility here. Now this would be a legendary animal in Job's time probably. So, but take a look. There's Job and there's the hippopotamus for scale, okay? Might God be referring to something like this as the most amazing animal ever? I will leave that to you to decide, but I think that's a possible candidate. Now, do we believe in any animals evolving, and what does the word evolve mean? Change. Did any animals change? How about that one on the right there? Yes. When God spoke to us, he said, You are cursed more than all cattle. On your belly you shall go and you shall eat dust. Okay, now I want to explain a term of thinking in Hebrew, okay? You are all Greeks. You can't help, you're born Greeks, you live in a Greek world. You can't think Hebrew very well, neither can I. Because the word blessing and cursing has two different meanings in those different cultures. As Greeks, we think when you bless somebody, you say, have a nice day. Have a nice day. Have a wonderful day. Or if they curse somebody, it's like they just cut you off in traffic. You think of stuff like that. But in Hebrew thinking, when something is blessed or something is cursed, it tangibly changes that thing. So in other words, if something is blessed, it is now a step or two or three better than what it was before. Cursing does the opposite. If something is cursed, it is now a step or two or three below what it was before, tangibly. For say blessing, let's say for a minute, Old Testament, a woman is blessed, now she can have children she couldn't before. There's a tangible difference. Do you understand what I mean? So, okay, now God says to the snake, the serpent, you are going to lose all of your attractiveness, all the ways in which you could tempt Eve. You are going to lose all those abilities. In fact, they're going to make you something so scary that women will run away, and others too, including me, away from snakes. And so that is tangibly changed, that animal. But look, it says cursed more than all the cattle. So all the cattle are feeling, or in other words, all the animals, this is a generic term for all animals the animals are affected tangibly by the curse of sin on the planet. You follow? So how does that look in those different animals? Now, the earth also was corrupt before God. The earth was filled with violence, so God looked upon the earth. Indeed, it was corrupt. All flesh had corrupted their way on the earth, and God said to Noah, the end of all flesh has come before me, for the earth is filled with violence through them. So remember last night I talked about this in the flood, and what triggered the flood, so much so that God had to actually think about the animals as well, being too violent. Well, take a look at some of these critters. I've got one down here. And there's been more than one kid that's told me that ankylosaur is their favorite dinosaur. So take a look at this guy up on top, an ankylosaur. An ankylosaur looks like a tank on four legs. This animal had spikes in its back. It had an armor-plated head. It had a club for a tail. This animal looked like it lived in a violent world. A violent world. Now, how did it get that way? How did it look? How did it develop or whatever? Because frankly, when I see that, or a Stegosaurus or Pachycephalosaurus, and Pachycephalosaurus means a bonehead dinosaur. Anyway, when you look at these things, they look like they're in a combat world. And I just wonder, violent men with high IQs and abilities to think and do, I wonder, and remember I told you last night that my theory about animals were that they were healthier, they had stronger DNA, they're more vital, they were able to produce greater varieties of offspring. I just wonder if they were more easy to breed. And I'm just wondering if some of these animals were bred by very violent people who wanted to breed some new pit bulls out of these or something that they could use in arenas or warriors in wars or hunters or who knows what. But I just wonder if maybe that's a source for some of these dinosaurs we see. I just wonder. What happened to the dinosaurs? Well, here's one theory. They were on the wrong boat. They didn't make that one in Kentucky. No, actually, the one in Kentucky does have dinosaurs on it, doesn't it? Anyway, I just wonder about this. It's kind of funny. So possible answer, you've heard that meteor strike might have actually wiped out dinosaurs. A lot of the movies that go back in time, supposedly dinosaur age shows, oh, here comes a meteor, and then boom, and then that's it for them. And that's based on some not bad science, because there is on top of, remember Cretaceous layer is the top of the dinosaurs. At the top of the Cretaceous layer in some places in the world, like in Canada and parts of North America, you have what's called a, well, what do you call it? You call it KT dust, or basically at the KT boundary. That's German Cretaceous Tertiary. But there is some actual dust in here that they think might be meteorite dust. And that's based on a rare element that's found in it. So anyway, it's interesting that the backside of the moon has been hit many times by meteors. Do you know what the backside, it always stays backside? So it's like it's almost a shield for the Earth. So anyway, lots and lots of meteor strikes. I actually think there is some logic to the idea of a meteor strike starting the flood. And a couple of reasons. Number one, the theology of casting stones is interesting to me, that it's a judgment tool by God in several places, including Daniel in the giant statue of Nebuchadnezzar's dream. Remember, the rock coming made out without hands? Anyway, there's several places in the Bible, Sodom and Gomorrah, last plagues in Revelation, where rocks come from outer space and do some damage. And I just wonder if maybe it struck the earth, knocked the earth off of its axis like this, because at the end of the flood, God says from now on we're going to have seasons, cold and warm, and this is what causes seasons. That's the tilt of the earth. Did rocks come and break up the crust of the earth, pressurize, water release, everything? So some things to think about. But anyway, to me it's wonderful speculation. Did dinosaurs get on the ark? And this is a question that a lot of people have asked, Christians certainly, and you know that the answers in Genesis people with the ark actually believe dinosaurs did. They don't necessarily have T-Rexes on the ark, I noticed that, but they do have other dinosaurs. And here's the thing, remember, what does the word dragon mean? Large reptile, large lizard, right? Okay, well, there are dragon stories all around the world, every corner. Not quite as common as the flood stories, but definitely common. And in those stories, you have human encounters with big lizards. And they're not the size of houses or more the size of horses or something. But anyway, in those stories with big lizards, there's always a couple of similarities. It's almost always there's one in the story. There's not flocks or herds or families. There's like one. And by the end of the story, for whatever reason, there are none at the end of the story. And it just seems like it's the last lingering memory of human encounters with lizards. Now, when you ask an evolutionist, why are all these dragon stories all around the world? Because if they're talking about dinosaurs, they died off in 65 million BC, right? So how would people make up all these consistent stories about big lizards? They're not stories about big wolves or big lions, tigers, or bears, depending upon where they live. Let's face it, if you lived in Europe and you found a big bone and you're scared of the big bone, wouldn't you think, I'll bet this was part of a wolf? That makes it scary. But why would you think, I think this giant evolutionists say they must have come up with the stories when they saw the big bones. And says, where do you get a lizard from a bone like this? I mean, a lizard is just a little annoying thing, you know. It's kind of like, honey, there's a lizard in the kitchen. Can you please get it out of here? You know, I mean, that's the scariest thing of a lizard, right? Why would you imagine giant lizards unless there's some truth, you know, that's been embellished over time. There seems to be these long-lasting memories. But the good news is, and this is good news for me, and this is one of the reasons I asked those scientists about whether there'd be dinosaurs in heaven or in the new earth. Notice this prediction in Isaiah 65. The wolf and the lamb shall feed together, okay? The lion shall eat straw like the ox. Predators and prey together. The nursing child shall play by the cobra's hole. What's a cobra? Snake. A friendly snake? A dangerous snake. And the weaned child shall put his hand in the viper's den. What's a viper? It's another snake, another scary snake. They shall not hurt nor destroy in all my holy mountain. In other words, God is restoring the reptile kingdom back to what it was before sin entered. And it's now a safe place for kids to play with and so on. Makes me wonder what that world was before sin entered and what it looked like in the reptile world. So you're getting an idea here now that I think there will be. Let's face it, of the best things God makes, what does Satan do with it? Corrupts it, messes with it. The best things. And I could give you several things, but one of them might have been the most amazing animal creations. Maybe the devil messed around with those. So anyway, that's it for dinosaurs. And I'll just close with this picture. So the great dragon was cast out, that serpent of old called the devil and Satan, who deceives the whole world. I'm going to put a really scary head on this guy. Okay, let's get scarier. There's a scary head. Okay, and I also changed the word dragon to dinosaur because they basically mean the same thing. It's a reasonable translation. So the great dinosaur was cast out, that serpent of old called the devil and Satan, who does what again? Deceives the whole world. Now, Revelation 12 is just before Revelation 13. Isn't that amazing? And then Revelation 13 is just in front of Revelation 14. 14 contains the last messages to the world before Jesus comes. We'll talk a little bit more about that tomorrow. Would this reference to a deceiving force, the power, have anything to do with the subject of creation in the very last days? And what does he use as a most powerful image of saying that story of Genesis about God creating us in his image? Come on. You're not seeing a dinosaur? Millions of years, folks. Millions of years. I think he uses this image to deceive the world into thinking we were not created in God's image, but actually we're all hairless monkeys. We are walking mutants. We are accidents of nature with no future and no purpose. I think he uses dinosaurs to promote that theory. That's my thinking. What do you think? Let's pray. Heavenly Father, thank you for the amazing world of dinosaurs. We see they were an amazing group of animals and not with us today. So we look forward, if we're going to see them at all, we're going to see them in the future, Lord. And I thank you, Lord, that you made us as the most amazing thing of all, in your image. Thank you for that, Lord. And thank you that you are a loving creator and our Savior. And we thank you in Jesus' name. Amen.
All right, a lot of food for thought. And I'm thankful so much for how Scripture comes together with these artifacts and how these researchers, those who come from an atheistic perspective, they say, well, we have to think on that a little bit longer. So tomorrow morning, does worship really matter to God? Does worship really matter to God? And how this ties in with the subject of origins. And you also remember that we have a first session actually starts at 9:30. 9:30 tomorrow morning. Yes. 9:30 tomorrow morning. And this is the Family Stable, the Sabbath School Ministry Initiative that we're doing during construction. As you can see, a lot of things have happened this week, right? And we are going to be losing a little bit more of, we have already lost a little bit more space there over in the parking lot. But it is a sign of good things to come. And we are thankful for that. And then session number 5. So again, if you're watching online or even if you're here now, you can scan that code and you could begin to submit your questions that we're going to pummel tomorrow evening. You're looking forward to that, all right? And so thank God for what he has in store. You have something else you're going to mention, Doc?
Back
Yes.
up just a second. I want to do one last thing. It'll only take about 1 minute. Can
Oh,
I
that's
do that?
fine.
1
That's
minute?
fine.
I need a volunteer, Ellie. Can I volunteer you to come up? Here she comes. Okay, now I want you to demonstrate. This is one of my favorite fossils, okay? I want you to hold out 2 hands. Look at the folks. Okay, hold that, show them. So, do you have an idea what that is? That's my favorite fossil. Hmm? A rock. It's a rock. It's turned into a rock. Yeah, what was it before? It's dinosaur poop.
Hey, no fear. We all got to hear.
Dinosaur poop.
Yep. I figured so.
Thank you, Ellie.
Wow.
Afterwards, you can come up and touch it too.
Wow. You see what time does? Time. Just give it time. Just give it time and it'll change, right? But of course, not a million years. Not a million years. So write those questions. We're looking forward to our time together. So see you at 9:30. 9:30 tomorrow morning. We have our Sabbath school program. I know that folk behind the scenes have been working on that. Then service at 10:45. And then in the evening at 6:30 when we culminate with the last brief presentation and our Q&A. God bless you. This is Pastor Gordon signing out. Have a good evening. Bye-bye.